Okay, so in this tutorial we're going to be looking at creating a face cam effect that does that pretty much. Okay, so it doesn't just do that, it does various other things. So if you come to your inspector, open effects, you've got various settings that you can change. So you can change the shape. If you're in rectangle mode, you can add corners, you can change the width and height of the rectangle, you can change the color of the border, you can play with the size of the image, and you can offset the image so that it's centralized if needs be, and you can adjust the drop shadow. So all those things are available. Obviously the size of the image will need to vary depending on which shape you use. So as a rectangle that works fine, as a circle it doesn't. You need to bring your image size up a bit. Okay, so I've come up to an empty timeline. You don't need footage on the timeline to do this. It just makes life a bit easier if you're actually working with something. So just bring any bit of footage onto the timeline, preferably a talking headshot, your face cam or whatever, and jump into Fusion. So once we're in Fusion, we're going to disconnect our MediaIn, which is your face cam footage, and our media out, and we're going to build everything in between. So the first thing you're going to need to be able to do is control the size of your face cam footage. So we're going to come to the hotbar, we're going to grab a merge node and we're going to bring it in. And we're going to pipe your face cam footage into the green foreground input of the merge. We're going to bring in a background node, which we're going to pipe into the yellow background input of the merge. At the minute nothing obvious has changed. You're going to select your background and you're going to drop the alpha to make it transparent. So this merge will allow us to resize and reposition the footage to wherever our face cam wants to sit. The next thing we're going to need is a rectangle to mask which bits of our footage we want to see. So we'll just put that back to size for now. So you're going to bring in a rectangle node. You're going to pipe it into the mask input. And so now this is going to be our face cam window, however we size it. So we can make it whatever size we want. The reason we needed to resize our footage with our merge node is so that we can get our footage inside our mask, like so. So what we need to be able to do is drag this rectangle around and position it wherever we want it on the screen, but obviously we need our footage to come with it. So to get that to happen, what we're going to do is we're going to select the rectangle, we're going to come to the inspector and we're going to click this pin in the top here. This will now keep this information in the inspector when we select another node, and the other node we're going to select is the merge node. So now you've got all your merge information at the top and your rectangle information at the bottom. And what we want is for the center of the merge to be in the same place as the center of our rectangle. To do that, you're going to come to the center in the merge information, right click and select expression. You're going to grab and hold the plus sign and drag a line down and find center in your rectangle, like so. So now what will happen if we select the rectangle and move it around, our picture will come with it. So you can now place your face cam wherever you want it. So next we're going to look at how we can give the option of the rectangle or a circular face cam window. So we're going to bring in an ellipse node. We're now going to bring in dissolve node, and we're going to use this dissolve node as a switch so that we can switch between the rectangle and the ellipse. So disconnect your rectangle for a minute, pipe the rectangle into the background, yellow input of the dissolve, and the ellipse into the foreground input, and then take the output of the dissolve and put it back into the mask input of the merge. Now, as you can see, our ellipse is currently in totally the wrong place. So again, we're going to tie the center of the ellipse to our rectangle. So our rectangle's still in the inspector, and our ellipse is now at the top. Right click center, expression, and then drag and pick the center for our circle. Next thing we want to do is tie the size of the ellipse to the size of the rectangle. And what I'm going to do is use the width setting of the rectangle to drive the size of our circle. You could keep it as an oval. I'm going to keep it as a circle. To do that, I'm going to right click on height in our ellipse settings, expression, and just drag it to width. So now the height and the width will remain the same. What we can now do is tie this width setting to the width of our rectangle. So right click on width, expression, and click and drag this down to width of our rectangle. We're still in a position where we can select our rectangle and move to where we want to be. With our circle, obviously we've got more room, so we would need to come back to our merge node and increase the size so that we fill the circle, like so. Now with the dissolve node, we can go between square and circle. Rather than having a slider, I'm going to set this up now so that it has just a checkbox. To do that, in the dissolve node, you're going to right click, you're going to go to edit controls, and this will bring up this window that will let you make a new control. And we're going to call our new control swap shape. It's going to be a number, so we can click on number. We want it to stay on the controls tab of the dissolve node, so we're going to select controls, and now we're going to scroll down this list and look for checkbox control and hit OK. Now you see our swap shape checkbox has appeared. All you need to do, right click on background foreground, expression, take the plus sign and just drop it over swap shape. So now we can do that. So we've got a circle or a rectangle. Using the rectangle, we can move it around, put it where we want. We can change the size, again using the rectangle. Even though we're working with the circle, we can change the size using the rectangle control. All this kind of becomes more relevant later on when we're exporting this and we're trying to keep controls to a minimum. With the merge node, we can change the size of our actual footage. Like so. The only other thing that I wanted is the ability to have this so you can move it left and right, up and down to keep the image centered. However, we've already used our center control by linking it to the rectangle center. So to do this, we're going to need to do another bit of this expression, and we're going to need to add a new control. Now we can do the edit control method that we've just done for our dissolve, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to bring in a node that's already got the control that I want. To do that, press Shift and Space Bar and type custom, and you're looking for custom tool. Click add, Now we don't want this connected to anything. It's just going to sit there. Also, just to make things simple, I'm going to rename my custom tool. So press F2 to rename it. And I'm just going to call it C, like so. Now with your custom tool selected, if you look in the inspector, you have all these different controls that you can reference. And we're going to reference point in 1. And that will allow us to offset the center value on our merge. So we're going to unpin the rectangle because we don't need that at the minute. And we're going to pin the custom tool. And then we're going to select our merge tool. So what we want is this expression here to be whatever value the center of the rectangle is plus whatever value we've got in point in 1, x and y. By default, we want these to both be 0, so we'll just put the 0 in first. Now we're going to come to this expression box and just click so we've got our cursor. We're going to add plus, so a mathematical plus, and then we're going to grab the little plus in the square and drop it on point in 1. So now we've got this expression that says the center of this image is going to be wherever the rectangle center is, plus whatever offset values we put in here. So now if we, for example, take the x value of point in 1, we can slide him over and put him in the middle, like so. What I'm going to do is I'm going to name a couple of nodes so that it makes sense later on what each node is doing. So the merge is being used to resize your image. So press F2 and just put resize image. Your rectangle is being used for your size and position of your facecam window. So again, F2 and just type size position. We won't be directly controlling anything in the ellipse node because that's all tied up to the rectangle, so we don't need to worry about that. Our control, which isn't connected to anything, is just a reference, and we will be pulling this value out when we need it. And I'll show you how to do that when we get to the macro building stage. Okay, so we've got our face cam. I'm going to add a little border to it, and to do that I'm going to select the size and position rectangle. I'm going to hold Control and click the ellipse so that they're both selected. Right click, copy, click away so that nothing's selected, right click, and we are going to paste an instance. So basically these two nodes are exact copies of these two nodes, and any changes made to these two will also be reflected in these two. And we want it that way for everything except for the border and the fact that it's solid, because we're going to make these into our border. So for each of the nodes you're going to select it. So we'll start with the ellipse. Let me just unpin that because we don't need it. We'll start with the ellipse. We're going to come to border width, right click and select de-instance. And we're going to do the same with the word solid. Now the border width and whether it's solid or not can be worked independently in this instance. Everything else is an exact copy. We're going to do the same with our size and position rectangle. So right click, de-instance border width and solid. So in both cases we're going to uncheck solid for both the instance rectangle and the instance ellipse. In the instance rectangle, let me just switch it back to rectangle so we can see what's happening. In the instance rectangle, we're going to put a border width of 0.005, like so. And we want our instance ellipse to match that, so we will pin our instance size and position rectangle. We'll select our ellipse, go to border width, right click expression, and then we're going to click and drag and find border width in our instance size position rectangle and select it. So now again we only need to change the border width in this instance rectangle. The ellipse will follow suit. So again, I'm going to select my instance size and position rectangle. I'm going to press F2 and I'm just going to name it border width. So I know that's what that node is doing. Again, we want the dissolve node. Now, my first thought was to instance it, but when I tried that earlier, every time I saved it, the instance value didn't stay. Whether that's a bug in 18 or not, I don't know. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in a new dissolve node, keeping to the same convention. So the rectangle goes into the background, the instance of the ellipse goes into the foreground. Oops, that's gone in the mask for some reason. Now with dissolve 1 selected, make sure it's pinned. Select dissolve 2, come to background, foreground, right click, expression, and you can either link it to background, foreground, or you can link it to swap shape. It doesn't really matter which. And now when we click our swap shape, so now we've got our two outlines. We need to have something to have as an outline. So to do that, we're going to bring in a background node. You can make your background whatever color you want. Pipe the output of the dissolve node into the mask input of the background, and we end up with our circle or rectangle, whichever. And then you're simply going to take the output of your background and merge it onto the output of your original size merge node. And that gives us our facecam window. Last thing I added in was a drop shadow. So with the last merge selected, shift space bar, drop to get drop shadow. And now you can see a slight shadowed edge. You can tweak your shadow as you see fit. So we can up the strength a bit, we can mess with the angle if you want to, change the drop distance and the blur, etc. Set that up how you want it, but that's the basic idea. We now pipe this back into our media in, or sorry, media out. And if we come back to the edit page, lift view up and put some footage underneath it. And we have our face cam against whatever you're talking about. And that's pretty much it. So what we're going to do now is just set it up how I would want it to default. So we can bring it down maybe a bit into the corner. So you've got your size and your position overall here. You've got your image size and offset here. You've got your switch in this dissolve. You've got your border width in this instance rectangle that we called border width. You've got your background colors and you've got your drop shadow controls. So how do we make this into something that we can keep and use on the edit page? Well, what we do is we make it into a macro. Now to make the macro, you need to well, you don't need to, it just makes life easier. You need to plan ahead and think about how you want your controls to appear in the inspector. So logically, I would suggest you want your switch at the top of your inspector. So select that node first. Now if you press and hold the control key and start selecting other nodes. So once we've got our switch, I'm going to go with the size and the position of the window. I'm then going to go with the border width, the border color. Then I'm going to come down to my footage size, and then I'm going to go to the custom tool that's got our offset in it, and then finally I'm going to hit drop shadow. That's selected most of your nodes. Still with the control key held down, if you now hit A, it will select all the others. For a macro to work as an effect, we want all these nodes except the media in, which we can click to deselect, and the media out, which we can click to deselect. Now you can let go of your control button. If you come to any of these nodes and right click, go to macro, create macro, and this window will open. This is your macro creation window. So you start at the top and you give it a name. You can call it what you want. And now you start working down your nodes. These are all the nodes. And if you look, they're in the order we selected them. So you've got your dissolve view switch, your size and position, border width, background color, the merge to resize your actual image, the custom tool to work the offset, and the drop shadow. If something is red, it has one of its controls checked or published, and we'll look at those as we come down. So starting with the dissolve node, we want the swap shape control, so just tick it. Now you can see as we tick that, dissolve turns red to say that you've got some controls selected. We don't need any of the other controls in the dissolve node. Next we come to size and position. This is for the size of the window and where it sits. So we need center, width, height, and corner radius. If you double click on center, you can now change the name. I'm going to change it to position. And then you can close that window. Next we come to border width, and that's what we want. So you've got border width here, just check that. Next you come to your background, and we're going to want to change colors. So you don't need to worry about this first section, so you can twiddle that up and close it. Again, we can double tap in the label and change it so that our controls make a bit more sense when we're in the edit page. Next we come to resize image. Now at the minute foreground is already checked, and that needs to stay checked because that's saying when we put this on a piece of media, the piece of media goes into the foreground input of the merge. If we come down, we need the size, and that's it, because the center is controlled through our rectangle and our offset control. So all we need is size. Next we come down to C, which was our custom tool. Now this has output already checked. We don't want that output, so uncheck it because our custom tool is here and not connected to anything. What we do want is this point in one. So we'll check that. And what we'll do is triple click or drag or whatever, select all the text. And what you're going to do is say image offset, so that you know that that's how you center your image in your window. Again, we can close that. And then we can open drop shadow. Drop shadow needs its output because the drop shadow is here and the output goes back to our timeline. So leave that checked. We'll do shadow strength, angle, drop distance, blur, and color. No, we won't do color. We'll just do down to blur. So that's all the controls that we want our user to be able to access from the edit page. Now, On Resolve 17, when you've got this window selected, you've got a menu here that says File and something else. I can't remember what the other thing is. And you'd hit File. On 18, the controls are in these three dots here. Either way, once you've got this menu open, you're going to save as group. You hit Save as group. It now gives you the option to save your macro. By default, it tries to save everything in the macros folder, which is the Fusion Tools folder, and we don't want it there. So on a Mac, you would hit this down arrow and come back to where it says Fusion. On a PC, you've got your list, I think, along the top. And again, you just go back one level until you're in the Fusion folder. From the Fusion folder, you're looking for templates. If you click and open templates, then you're looking for edit and effects. And basically you would open that effects, and that's where you're going to save. Okay, just as a side note, if you're on, I think 17.4 upwards, if you're looking for the edit folder, it may not be there. So what you'll need to do is, once you're in templates, go to new folder. That will create a new folder and call it edit. If you then open that folder, you will have to create another folder called effects. Make sure that they're named exactly the same. So edit, capital E D I T, and effects, capital E, etc. So just bear that in mind. If you get to the templates folder and you don't have any of these sort of edit folders or effects folders, it's not a problem. Just create them and then you can carry on. So if you click save, it will now save your macro to that folder. If everything's worked out, you can now close this window, come to the edit page, and maybe if you search for face, you've now got your face. I saved it as Facecam 2 because I knew I'd already got this one saved. You've got your Facecam already saved. So now we can actually try it out. So if we bring in some footage, so this was the footage we used to build it. This doesn't have the Facecam on it. You get your Facecam 2, drop it on, and it instantly changes your full screen footage into your Facecam. You can select it, you can come to effects, and we've got all those controls that we made available. So we can swap the shape, we can change the border width, we can change the color of our border, we can change the size of our image, we can mess with the offset, etc. And that is your nice basic Facecam effect usable from the edit page. If you want to get more adventurous, you can add labels and then dig through the code and sort of split these into sections, but there's not too many controls there to get you confused. And that is it. I hope that was helpful and useful. I hope even if you don't want to build a Facecam, you've got some ideas on using expressions, you've got how to save macros, where to save them. Obviously this is an effect, so it got saved in the effect folder. If you're making a title, you would save it in the titles rather than the effects folder, etc. Anyway, I'm waffling and I'm going to let you go, and thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Please feel free to like, subscribe and hit the notification bell, and I will catch you on the next one. Cheers.